What is it about Friday the 13th that makes it so visually terrifying even after 40 years? Stick around because we're about to break down the filmmaking and cinematography techniques that made this low-budget slasher look, feel, and sound so frightening. A group of teenagers go to Camp Crystal Lake for the summer and end up getting picked off one by one by an unseen killer.
I don't know if I'm gonna last all week.
Maybe you heard the story before. Even in 1980, when Friday the 13th was released. It wasn't the first slasher film, but it's certainly the first slasher film as we know it. One of the main criticisms of the movie is that it is extremely derivative, and there's a lot of truth in that. However, what I find distinctive though is that Friday the 13th picked just the right things while combining enough originality to create an entire new genre. It has a great mystery and a powerful story strong enough to have spawned countless sequels, none of which resemble the original in any way. Let me give you an example of why Friday the 13th is special, especially the direction by Sean Cunningham. Here's a scene late in the film where Alice, the final girl, waits for her friend Bill to return. It's a 2-minute shot of a recipe for instant coffee. All she does is put the water to boil, get some cups, add a spoonful of coffee, and look for the sugar. And this is my favorite shot in the movie. Why? First are the dark windows you can't see outside. You know there's a killer on the loose, and she's probably next. Where is the killer going to come from? Her darting glances add a lot to the suspense here. Every time the camera follows her, we wait for the jump scare. Then she goes into the pantry to get sugar, and that's nerve-wracking as hell. Finally, she returns back, and the camera slowly moves in while she makes up her mind. You really don't notice 2 minutes have passed, and that's masterful film direction. My second favorite part of Friday the 13th was the jump scare at the end at the lake. I'm not spoiling it for you here, but this one was special, and it wasn't even in the original script. Did any film bar Psycho and Jaws have a thrilling jump scare like that? Has to be one of the all-time greats. Many of the most memorable shots in Friday the 13th are point-of-view shots. We see through the killer's eyes. This is incredibly unsettling because it makes us feel like we are part of the horror lurking in the shadows. Films like Black Christmas and Halloween paved the way with its point-of-view shots. But in Friday the 13th, the shots take on a completely different feel. We're constantly forced to shift perspectives between being part of the group and being far removed. In a lot of slasher films, you might see the killer from a distance, stalking their prey, but in Friday the 13th, the camera is the killer. We're sneaking up behind these kids, watching their every move, and it's this voyeuristic perspective that makes it so terrifying. There's something deeply unsettling about knowing you're in the killer's shoes, watching the victims without them knowing. Another critical aspect that sets apart Friday the 13th from Halloween or Black Christmas is the cinematography. Cinematographer Barry Abrams used a lot of naturalistic lighting to give the film its signature eerie look. It's not overtly stylized and has more of a documentary-like feel. The day exteriors are mostly overcast, dull even. It almost feels like a documentary. Slowly, as the storm arrives, it gets grayer, and then at night, it's a deep, rich black. Due to budgetary reasons, a lot of the shadows don't have details, leaving us guessing where the killer will strike from next. The other reason Friday the 13th stands apart is because of its gore. This is directly influenced by giallo films like Bay of Blood, directed by Mario Bava. Today, we don't accept a slasher film without some level of in-your-face gore. Tom Savini, the special effects master who worked on Friday the 13th, is one of the reasons the film's visuals are so terrifying. You've got the blood, the brutal deaths, the jump scares. It's all done with practical effects. Practical effects age well, at least when handled by a master. The rules of slasher films are directly taken from Friday the 13th.
She never showed her tits till she went legit. That's why she always outsmarted the killer in the big chase scene at the end.
The final girl, the goofball friend, the macho men, the promiscuous girls, they've all become stereotypes today, but it wasn't the case in 1980. Like most slasher films, Friday the 13th was made on a low budget, but not really that low. Today it would translate to about $2 million, still low by Hollywood standards. Instead of letting that hold them back, the filmmakers used their limitations to their advantage. They couldn't afford elaborate special effects or flashy set pieces, so they leaned into suspense, tension, and atmosphere. Some of the suspenseful stalking scenes still hold up today. Instead of elaborate tracking shots or cranes, they relied on simple but effective camera angles. Many scenes are shot with the camera static or handheld, giving the film a raw, unpolished feel. This actually works in the movie's favor because it makes everything feel more intimate, more grounded. Sometimes simplicity is the best tool in a horror director's kit. By keeping things low budget and straightforward, Friday the 13th forces the audience to fill in the blanks with their own imagination, and that's often scarier than anything you could put up on screen. A lot of unsettling camera angles keep the audience on edge. You'll notice the characters are often framed in wide shots, surrounded by a lot of empty space. This gives the impression that they're small and vulnerable, lost in a nightmare that's out to get them. The forest, the cabins, even the lake, all of these places are shot in a way that makes the characters feel isolated, with danger lurking just beyond the frame. This technique is called open framing. In contrast, the tight close-ups, especially in moments of fear or tension, create a sense of claustrophobia. We feel trapped with the characters, unable to escape the killer's grasp. Even in the quieter moments, the framing suggests that something is always just out of sight. That kind of visual storytelling is timeless. You can watch this movie today and it's just as effective as it was in 1980. The iconic sound design and background score played its part too. That's composer Harry Manfredini's way of getting under your skin. The sound represents the killer, and every time you hear it, you know something bad is about to happen. But what's genius about it is how subtle it is. It's not loud, it's just there, creeping into your conscious, heightening the tension. Contrast this to the in-your-face music in Halloween or the typical giallo film. The sound design in Friday the 13th works with the visuals to create an all-encompassing atmosphere of dread. There are long stretches of silence punctuated by loud footsteps, rustling leaves, the wind, rain, and distant screams. It's a great job of sound editing and mixing, and it's almost a shame the film was originally mixed in mono. Imagine watching it in surround sound. When sound is used minimalistically in this way, it makes you aware of all the little details that much more. It amplifies the isolation the characters are experiencing, and just like with the visuals, it's what we don't hear that scares us the most. Great directors like Wes Craven and Sam Raimi have spoken about how Friday the 13th influenced their own approaches to violence and tension in their films. Who can forget the point of view shots in Evil Dead, or the playfulness of Scream, which is a film that doesn't take itself too seriously. Slashers can be thrilling without being pretentious. The visuals of Friday the 13th tap into our deepest fears through a masterful combination of filmmaking techniques. It's not just about the gore or the jump scares, it's also about the atmosphere that the filmmakers create, a claustrophobic, isolated world at Camp Crystal Lake. You feel like you're there with the characters. Even though none of the characters stand out as being iconic, they are interesting, and the director chose actors who make them come alive. Rewatch it and you'll realize just how clever these techniques were in creating fear that lasts. I won't jump scare you with my next video, it's right there. Click it if you dare to watch another great video.